So I really like this website that I tapped into. It's not a website you have to use, but you can see it up here. What I like about it is it just really, I think, goes through in a real rich way all the tests and determinations that are made to come up with our ASIA impairment scale with the American Spinal Cord Association Impairment Scale. ASIA is an abbreviation of that that you have an UMFRED on table 10-1. So you don't need to know how the actual tests are done to come up with determination, because that is beyond the scope of a PT or PTA. The actual testing and determination as where people land on the scale are done by a neurologist and done with patients. It involves sensory testing, some motor testing, and the key area also is sphincter control, which is what it sounds like. And this website talks about that right up in here. And it remarkably, using those tests and such, you can really have a good idea as to where a person lands on the scale, and it's a really nice way of classifying somebody. Not to be overly simplistic, but it gives you, certainly as a treating PTA, a real nice kind of algorithm, for lack of a better word, to look at. And if someone is classified, let's say, as D, you know that that person has some motor function preserved below the level of injury. So this would not be a complete spinal cord injury. This is incomplete. Incomplete. And so they have at least half or more of the key muscle functions below the neurological level of injury, with a muscle grade of equal to 3 or greater. So they may have a muscle grade of 3+ or 4- at half or more of the key muscles below the neurological level of injury. So for example, if they were a C7, that is their neurological classification of injury at that segment, they have half or more of those key muscle functions below C7 at equal to 3 or better. So it's just the opposite of what you're graded in terms of your letter grades for coursework. A is not good. A is a reality. A is what we call a complete spinal cord injury, which is what we were talking about in the earlier screen guide lesson that I had on the levels of injury that are covered in UMFRED and also in that table that I have up here, right? So I think this is a great resource you have in your book. I don't think I need to really get more into it. So I will talk just briefly what's the difference between a B and an A. So as I mentioned earlier, these neurologists go through all these different other testing, right, to make that determination where the person lands as far as categorization on this scale. So if a B, they do have sensory preserved below the neurological level, which includes sacral segments 4 and 5, and no motor function is below more than 3 levels below the motor level on either side of the body. So what that would mean is that someone who's a C7, to use that analogy, would have no motor function more than 3 levels below. So if they're 7, 8, 9, 10, they would have no motor function below the level of C10. Okay? on either side of the body. On either side of the body. So that would be considered sensory incomplete. Not complete, sensory incomplete. And then finally, the motor incomplete. The motor function is preserved below the level of injury, and more than half of the key muscles below the neurological level have a muscle grade of less than 3. That would be 0 to 2. So C, as you can see, is much different than A, and there's just more possibilities in terms of activities of daily living. A person would have just the ability to move more muscles, and not to move them against gravity, but to be able to move key muscles in a gravity eliminated position, which is kind of exciting from the rehab perspective. But you work with people where they're at, and I think what's important when you work with people is not to work with them with an A and think, oh gosh, I wish they were a B or a C. An A is where they're at, and so that's where you work with that patient to optimize their highest level of function and their highest quality of life. And thinking about the ICF classification, the International Classification for Disability and Function, the ICF model, social activities, activities of daily living, access to their environment, all these things are so important regardless if someone is an A or an E.